round 2. Now, we thought the Patriots might move up in round 2 to start day 2, but they did not. They decided to stick and pick at 46, and they drafted Georgia Tech edge Keion White, Greg.
Yeah, this is where things start to get a little bit dicey for me. Look, Keion White is a good prospect for them on paper. He checks a lot of the boxes, quote unquote, that they look for. I have questions about whether they should be looking for those things anymore. If that led you to Ty Warren in 2003, should you be looking for the same thing in 2023? I have questions about that. I think White is fine. I think he'll play in the league a long time. I think he's a good player. I just don't like how in the second round you're getting a guy who's not really an edge player. He's not really an internal guy. He's a swing guy, and given what the Patriots have on their roster and how they view certain people, like basically Keion White's a Dietrich Wise replacement. If you could tell me today that Keion White has the ability or the chance to come in and displace Dietrich Wise and be the starter within the next year and a half, then I'd be like, okay, I'm on board, because I've been trying to upgrade that spot forever. I just have my doubts whether that's going to happen. So now we get into, how long. I think a lot of these picks from here on out are backup replacement, way down the line stuff where I think they should have been swinging a little bit more.
It all depends on how they see him. He has athleticism. He has power. He is, as you said, like if you were going to build a Madden player and his frame and all of that, Keion White fits the description. He was a tight end, started at Old Dominion, and then moved on to Georgia Tech. He's an older guy who they drafted, which was another theme in this draft. They tend to draft guys that are a little bit older. So, how much potential? That's the question. I mean, the guy has been a full-time defensive player for like a season. So how much potential is there? Seems to be a lot. Does he reach that? None of us know. But, I thought that theoretically, Greg, this pick is a good pick. Theoretically. And will it work out? Again, I hate to sound like I'm sitting on the fence. We just don't know. If you tell me this is a guy that can play the edge a little bit, he can move inside and get some bull rush for you. You can move him along the defensive line. He brings that athleticism. Then it's a fine pick by me.
Yeah, but that's Dietrich Wise. I mean, that's what Dietrich Wise does, and he's one of Belichick's favorite players. I just don't understand the point of the pick in that he's not going to play anytime soon. Like if you told me Dietrich Wise's job is in danger, Bill Belichick wants to put Mac Jones's job in danger, okay, but right now, I mean, let's just take the team for this year in sub, and his best chances to get on the field in sub. It's Uche, it's Judon on the edge, it's Dietrich Wise inside, and it's Christian Barmore. Who's coming off the field to get Keion White snaps? I just have a hard time seeing it, so that's why I think it's a luxury pick. It's a lot of these picks are if the Patriots are in the AFC Championship game every year, and they're fighting just to get into the playoffs now.
All right, well, if we're going to go big picture, let's go big picture. Here's the thing. Here's what I think, okay? I think the Patriots did not love the wide receivers in this draft. I think the Patriots did not love the offensive tackles in this draft. And if you listen to all the draft pundits and analysts, whatever the hell they're worth, it was a very thin offensive tackle class. Once you got to Broderick Jones, that was pretty much it as far as guys who could really plug and play. So the Patriots didn't like Broderick Jones because he had some issues off the field. They weren't going to draft him. All the other tackles were off the board. They weren't going to move up, obviously. They had a cluster of players, whatever that is, okay? When you look at wide receiver, again, people would tell you, unless you were going to draft a guy somewhere in the 20s, this class was pretty thin. I don't have an issue with the lotto picks they took.
What about tight end?
New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.
Okay, tight end.
There was a whole run at the top of the second round that they missed out on, and instead they sat and took Keion White. That would be one of my big criticisms, and I do think you gotta identify a couple tackles. They weren't all bad in this draft. I mean, Carter Warren is a guy later who they passed on in sort of their fourth round, third round type of thing like that. The big criticism would be, I like a lot of their picks. Okay, but I think they were like really safe where they should have been able to identify a tackle and a tight end at least. And you throw that in the mix with Christian Gonzalez, you get a tackle, say, trade up, identify somebody in the third round. DeJuan Jones was out there. There's some medical questions about him. You trade up anywhere in the second round and get a tight end, and then you do Christian Gonzalez, a tight end. You get Keion White, you get Mapu or whatever, and then you get a developmental tackle. That's a knocked out of the park draft in terms of my mind. This was the Patriots playing it safe when we've seen them be aggressive for, especially defensive people in the past.
Okay, so again, we're off the rails with the plan. I'm throwing the plan out because now we're knee deep into this. Okay, we're just going to roll with this. If you see Sidy Sow, and I know how you feel about Sow, you don't believe he's a tackle. You believe he's a backup tackle at best. I saw you tweet about it. I get it. But it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what I think. It's the guys that are in the room drafting, okay? If they believe Sidy Sow is a developmental tackle, then that's what they got. I don't have much of an issue of drafting a developmental tackle if you don't like the tackle class. Matthew Bergeron's tape, I heard many people say this, was not very impressive. DeJuan Jones, you brought him up. There's a reason why he fell to the fourth round. The guy's full of red flags from what I read. So again, if Sidy Sow works as a developmental tackle, how much did you lose? If you drafted 3 interior offensive linemen like I thought they did on Saturday, and Sidy Sow ended up not being capable of, if he's not capable of playing tackle, and they're totally wrong on the player, and Adrian Clem can't help him out, then you look back and you absolutely say, yeah, well, that was a big miss. The tight end point, I agree with your tight end point. But the one of the things that to me, there were a couple of things about this draft I didn't like. And one of them was not taking a tight end. This was a very deep tight end class. It was perfectly set up for them to find a guy who's young that they could work with, develop, and go into next year. And we'll get into this. There are major questions about this roster next season. I know people don't want to listen to it because we're focused on this year. But when you look at offensive tackle, you look at tight end, and you could also look at wide receiver, we've got legitimate questions about those positions now. So I totally agree with you on that. However, if you look at this, Greg, and one of your criticisms, and I'm going to push back here because one of your criticisms is that this team hasn't drafted for the future. They haven't set themselves up to replace guys on the roster, right? And yes, they didn't do so much at tight end, and I agree with that. The issue is they had a lot of holes for the future. We've talked about that. The 2024 offseason, they've got a bunch of guys coming off the books. So they had a bunch of positions to look at. So if you tell me they got Christian Gonzalez, who's a bona fide cornerback 1, if all things go well, okay. They got Keion White, which, again, it depends on their evaluation of the player. You don't think he can play edge. I've heard other people say he can't play edge. There are other people that have looked at him and said, well, he's young. He's going to develop. He's got athleticism. You could play him in the edge in Belichick's system. If you believe that, then you've got Judon getting older and his contract coming up soon. You've got Uche, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent, who I think is going to make a lot of money in the offseason. So they're looking at it and saying, we need somebody to replace those guys. So if we're going to sit there and we're going to bitch about them not being ready for certain positions, and then they draft guys who are theoretically going to replace those positions down the road, you can say the same thing about Mafi replacing Onwenu if Onwenu is not going to sign in New England. You need somebody who's good enough to back him up and be ready and plug him in at right guard. So Mafi's that guy. To me, it's Sidy Sow. If Sidy Sow works as a tackle, then the draft makes a little bit more sense to me. It makes actually much more sense to me. If Sow doesn't work as a tackle, then you drafted 3 interior offensive linemen and moved up for a kicker, and you're going to regret that.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with that, and I don't have a problem. And actually, like we've talked about, I'm very much in favor of let's get succession plans started. My bigger problem has been they've whiffed on succession plans at big places. The offensive line is one of the, you should be able to bring a guy in and they take these guys, 4th, 5th, 6th round. Okay. I mean, look at Onwenu, 6th round pick, that's the ideal thing. But we're staring at a roster where they're losing 2 wide receivers. And granted, I told you, I hated the wide receiver draft, and I don't mind what they did at receiver, but you got 2 tight ends going into the final year of their deal. You have it's slipping my mind right now, but you have other things that are a little bit pricier where you need to replace people, and defensive line, which was probably one of the strongest units that they had on the team last year. Nobody's really going anywhere, anytime soon. I have a hard time seeing Judon going anywhere. Uche will, but I don't think this is that the Keion White pick was for that sort of thing. I just think that they're starting succession plans at places where you can do it a lot of different ways. Whereas the price here at the offensive tackle and tight end are the two big ones that are glaring red needs a year from now, at least at the latest. And they didn't do anything there. And I just thought, if they would have done that and then done a lot of the other things, I would have said this draft was awesome. But they Bills just sort of chose to sit back and let the draft come to him, and he only moved up for a kicker. That's a little bit tougher for me.
The Greg Bedard Patriots podcast is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.